Look closely. You have seen it 1,000 times. On a wrist. Around a neck. Woven into hair. Stitched into fabric. Scattered across market stalls from Lagos to London. Musicians wear them. Fashion designers celebrate them. Artists display them. Entire brands build identities around them. Grandmothers pass them down. Children wear them without question. And if you stop 10 people wearing cowries and asked one simple question, what does it mean? Some will say it looks beautiful. Others will say it represents Africa. Some will call it culture. Some will call it tradition. And none of those answers are wrong. But they are only fragments of a much older story. But what if the story is darker than you imagined? What if the symbol you wear to honor Africa was once used to destroy it? What if this tiny shell was used to buy human beings? To understand what this shell truly means, we must travel back. Back before the fashion. Back before the markets. Back before the kingdoms. To a time when this shell was not yet money, not yet power, not yet pain. To a time when the first thing it ever carried was meaning. The shell remembers. And now, you will remember.
The cowrie shell did not begin in Africa. It began here, in the warm, shallow waters of the Indian Ocean, around the islands of the Maldives, in a reef so beautiful, it seems impossible. To reach Africa, this shell crossed oceans on ancient trading vessels. It crossed the Sahara on the backs of camels. It passed through hands that spoke a dozen different languages. It traveled for months, sometimes years, before it ever arrived in a West African marketplace. When the shell arrived West Africa, people did not simply see a shell. They saw something unusual, something beautiful, something different from anything found on local shores. Its color was luminous. Its shape was unlike ordinary things. And then people began to see something in its shape, something that connected it to the deepest mysteries of existence. The human eye, the seed of new life, the crescent moon, the beginning of all things. Whether this was seen symbolically, spiritually, or simply beautifully, the connection was felt. And once people feel a connection between an object and a mystery, something remarkable happens. Trust is how symbols are born, not through a single decision, not through a decree, but through the slow, accumulating agreement of a community. When enough people believe that an object carries meaning, it does. Long before the cowrie became money, its first value was this: meaning, pure meaning. The power did not begin in the marketplace. It began in the human imagination. And once human beings agree that something carries meaning, there is almost no limit to where that meaning can travel.
By the time the Mali Empire reached its height in the 13th century, the cowrie shell had done something extraordinary. It had become money. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, the kind that built empires. From the markets of Timbuktu to the royal courts of Benin, from the trading posts of the house estates to the kingdoms of the Yoruba, cowrie shells move through West Africa the way blood moves through a body, connecting everything, sustaining everything, keeping the whole system alive. The cowrie economy was not simple. It was sophisticated. Shells were counted in standardized units groups of 40, 200, 2,000. A farmer could sell a basket of yams for shells. A craftsman received payment in shells. Taxes were collected in shells. And in some kingdoms, a person's entire wealth was measured in the number of shells they could count. Kings stored cowrie shells in royal treasuries. Armies were funded with shells. Alliances were sealed with shells. The shell had moved from the marketplace to the palace, and in doing so, it had become something no symbol had ever been before. It had become power. The cowrie succeeded not just because of its meaning. It succeeded because it was brilliant money. It was recognizable. Nobody could mistake it. It was nearly impossible to counterfeit. It was durable enough to last centuries. It was portable enough to carry across kingdoms. And it was divisible. You could always make exact change. In every way that mattered, the cowrie was as sophisticated as any currency that came before or after it. When the Portuguese first arrived on the West African coast, in the late 15th century, they came looking for gold, for spices, for trade routes. But what they found was something far more useful. A currency that an entire continent already trusted completely. They realized something that would change the course of history. The cowrie shell, Africa's most trusted currency, could be harvested in almost unlimited quantities from the Maldive Islands in the Indian Ocean. Shells that cost almost nothing to collect. Shells that could purchase almost anything in West Africa, including people. Entire ships were loaded with nothing but cowrie shells, collected in the Maldives for almost no cost, transported to the West African coast, and exchanged for human beings. This was not trade. This was engineering, economic engineering, designed to exploit a system of trust that African societies had built over centuries. When European traders flooded West African markets with billions of artificially imported shells, the cowrie economy collapsed. A currency that had maintained its value through careful management and controlled supply was suddenly everywhere. And so the shell that had represented life was used to purchase the living. The symbol that had meant fertility, protection, abundance, and divine blessing became the currency of the transatlantic slave trade. Historians estimate that billions of cowrie shells were used to purchase enslaved Africans across the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. Africa's symbol of life became the currency of its destruction. The shell did not choose this. It carried meaning because people gave it meaning. And then other people took that meaning and used it as a weapon. The same object, the same shell. Two entirely different worlds of intention. But the story is not over. Because while Europe was using the shell to destroy, something else was happening. Something that history almost forgot to record. Not every African ruler was blind to what was happening. Across West Africa, sharp minds in royal councils began to identify the pattern. The shells were arriving too fast, in quantities no natural trade could explain. And the connection between the flood of shells and the disappearance of people was becoming impossible to ignore. Some kingdoms refused entirely. Royal decrees were issued. Trading parties were turned away. Certain rulers understood that no quantity of shells was worth what was being asked in return. These acts of refusal were real. They were costly. European trading companies responded to resistance, with economic pressure, with threats, and sometimes with violence. But the refusals happened. The history of African participation in the slave trade is one of the most painful and complex chapters in this story. Some rulers resisted. Some collaborated. Many existed somewhere in the terrible space between, coerced by military pressure, trapped by economic dependency, manipulated by systems designed specifically to make resistance costly and collaboration appear inevitable. History has often judged these rulers without understanding the trap they were placed in. That trap was engineered. It was not accidental, but something extraordinary was happening alongside the economic destruction. In shrines, in private homes, in sacred spaces, the cowrie shell continued to carry its original meaning. Priests kept using it. Mothers kept placing it on children. The spiritual identity of the shell was being actively, deliberately, and quietly preserved, even as its economic identity was being destroyed. This was resistance. It simply did not look like war. The cowrie shell crossed the Atlantic, not in a trading vessel. It crossed in the memory and the spiritual knowledge of the people who were taken. In the Caribbean, in Brazil, in the American South, wherever the African diaspora was forced to settle, the cowrie shell appeared again. In sacred ceremonies and in protective rituals, colonial administrations had replaced the cowrie in the marketplace with their own currencies. The shell's age as money was ending, but that could not be replaced by a colonial coin. Grandmothers kept passing it down. Mothers kept placing it on children. Communities kept incorporating it into the ceremonies of birth, marriage, and death. The market had changed. The meaning had not. You can replace a currency. You cannot replace what people choose to remember.
In the early 20th century, it did not end with a war. It ended with a signature. Colonial administrations across West Africa formally declared the cowrie shell worthless, no longer legal tender. Centuries of monetary tradition dismissed with the stroke of a pen. To the men who signed these decrees, It was simply administration. They had no idea what they were ending. In the markets, the change arrived. An old trader would offer shells that had been money his entire life, and be told, gently, that they were no longer accepted. For a generation that had counted their wealth, paid their taxes, and sealed their marriages in cowrie shells. This was not just an economic change. It was the end of a world they had always known. But the shell did not disappear. It migrated. As it lost its place in the marketplace, it found a new home on the human body. Sewn into ceremonial garments. Threaded into hair. Strung into necklaces and bracelets. The shell that had been wealth became beauty. And in making this journey, it carried its meaning to safety. Into places no colonial decree could ever reach. And then something remarkable happened. As African nations rose to reclaim their independence, in the mid-20th century, they reached back for the symbols of who they had been before colonialism arrived. The cowrie shell, once declared worthless, became an emblem of pride, of heritage, of authenticity. The shell that colonialism had tried to erase became a symbol of colonialism's end. Today, the cowrie shell has completed a journey that spans 3,000 years, and every continent on Earth. It travels the world's fashion runways. It appears in music, in art, in the ceremonies of the African diaspora, from Kingston to New Orleans to Sao Paulo. Worn by millions who feel its power even when they do not know its full story. The shell that was carried across the ocean, in the hands of the enslaved, now travels the world as a symbol of who those people were, and who their descendants have become. This shell survived. It survived the harvest and the flood. It survived the transaction and the decree. It survived the ocean crossing and the colonial pen. It survived every attempt to strip it of its meaning, and it emerged carrying more meaning than ever before. But survival raises a final question. A question that belongs not to the past, but to you. Now that you know the story, what does it mean to wear the shell today?
She does not know the full story yet. She knows the shell is beautiful. She knows it connects her to something. Africa, heritage, identity, something she feels more than she can name. She has worn it for years. She chose it deliberately. But the full weight of what she is carrying around her neck, the 3,000-year journey, the kingdoms, the slave trade, the shrines, the grandmothers, the survival, she does not yet know all of that. But you do. You know now. And that changes everything. What does it mean? It means wealth, the kind that built empires. It means life, the kind that creates future generations. It means protection, the kind that communities offer their most vulnerable. It means power, the kind that legitimate rulers carry as responsibility. It means spirit. And it means survival. That is what this shell means. That is what you carry when you wear it. Every person in this story carried the shell differently. The cowrie shell did not survive because institutions preserved it. It did not survive because historians recorded it. It survived because grandmothers told granddaughters. Because mothers tied bracelets on small wrists. Because families kept returning to a symbol that held more of their story than any textbook ever would. The most powerful archive in human history. So here is the question that this history places in your hands. If you wear the cowrie shell today, knowing what you now know, what are you carrying? Are you carrying the symbol of life that African societies built over centuries? Are you carrying the memory of those who kept its meaning alive through slavery, through colonialism, through every attempt to erase it? Perhaps you are carrying all of those things at once. Perhaps that is exactly what a symbol this powerful was always meant to do. If this story changed the way you see the world around you, if you will never look at a cowrie shell the same way again, then there are hundreds more stories like this one. Stories that history almost lost. Stories that Africa remembers. Subscribe to Untold Africa. And we will keep remembering, together.